How's it going, everybody? I am DeanoGTO, and today we're going to be discussing the AMX 50B line and why it's great to grind through this line and also grind other lines while this is top of the tree. So it's top of the tree for the entirety of the month of April, which means there's discounts active on the entire line, like Tier 5, Tier 2, or Tier 2 to Tier 5, sorry, are all 50% discounted, and Tier 6 Tier 10 are all 30% discounted, making it a lot cheaper to actually progress through the line. And then there's also some missions active where for your second victory each day where you're in the top 10 of your team, you get a ×5 to your XP, which makes it a lot easier to actually unlock modules and just in general just progress up the different vehicles in the line. So it'll make just the grind in general a lot easier, a lot smoother, and it'll make actually unlocking, or not unlocking, sorry, it'll make purchasing the vehicles a lot less expensive than normal. So there's a lot of advantages to, and there's a lot of advantages and a lot of incentives to actually go down this line and progress down the 50B line just in general. Now, there's also some advantages for people who are fighting against this line. Like as an example, I've been grinding the T10 and also the EBR Hatchkiss while this line has been top of the tree. And the reason why is because all of the vehicles Tier 5 to Tier 10 have really, really terrible armor in this line, and they're all massive targets. Tier 5 to Tier 7 are all really slow, Tier 8 to Tier 10 are all really fast, but all of them are universally massive targets with useless armor. I mean, there are some wee zones which you could argue are pretty good, like the Aerial 44 has OK side armor at 60 and OK frontal plate armor, but the turret, just as a general rule in this tree, is pretty useless. Like, it's got overmatch zones and it's also got 120 front armor, which is pretty useless as you can probably imagine, considering the gun mantlet doesn't cover most of it. So yeah, and then when it comes to the Tier 10, you've got a good upper front plate and a good lower front plate, but everywhere else is paper thin. And then when it comes to the 5120, you have 80 side armor, which is the best of the line, and I think it actually might be the best of the tree. But yeah, 80 side armor, even if you're even with 80 side armor, you have to be incredibly careful with the way you angle, because if you over angle, people are just going to penetrate you and be able to get shots into your like up front plates armor, which is absolutely garbage, as you can probably imagine. But let's just go through why these vehicles are awkward and just ways you can easily kill them. So let's start off with the Aerial 44, because this is the first one which actually could be potentially a wee bit tricky. Now, this thing here does have a powerful gun selection. It has 105mm and 90mm, but the armor on the side is 60mm, which means that things like the EBR Hatchkiss can actually overmatch the, or well, not overmatch, sorry, can penetrate the side armor on this thing with 75 penetration HE rounds, and it also has a very weak upgraded turret, which has, I think it is 30 side armor, which is absolutely useless, and pretty much every EBR Hatchkiss that you come across is going to fire HE rounds into the side armor of your turret, screw up your crew, and also just get like 270 damage on you every single time they fire. And there's also kind of a slow vehicle, and because of its crap turret, it can't really side scrape either, because if you side scrape, then people just shoot your turret and penetrate you every single time. Then we get to the AMX M445. The M445 is pretty much the most useless tank in this tree. It is garbage. It has overmatchable side armor for guns bigger than 120mm, so all of the Russians, coincidentally. All the Russian 122s, coincidentally, I should say. And then the upper front plate is garbage, 90mm. It's about as effective as the Tiger 1's armor at tier 7. That's not particularly useful. And then the third armor is pretty crap as well, because, well, it's actually weaker front armor wise than the Aerial 44. Now, it is better armored all around, but it's still pretty useless armor wise. And it also has the pretty significant disadvantage of just the way the tank is shaped. So you can see here, this lower section of the hull, you have 10 degrees of gun depression for this entire like lower section of the hull down here. But the second you get to this step, you have -1 degree of gun depression rather than -10. Which makes this thing incredibly awkward to drive, and if you come up against a medium tank that rushes you, then you're dead, because you can't point your gun at them. It's a very easy thing you can do to just get around this thing, and hell, even EBR Hatchkisses and things like that there can just circle this thing all day, every day, and just farm this thing for everything it has, pretty much. Then you get to the 5100, this thing just universally has pretty terrible armor. It does have 90mm of upper front plate armor, which can troll you from time to time whenever you're firing on it, but it's very rare. Pretty much all you have to do is hit this thing and you're going to do damage. And at the moment you have a lot of people who have basically picked this thing up as probably their first ever autoloader, and they're really excited and they want to like jump in and play this thing as much as they can. And then they rush into a crowd of like 3 enemy tanks and then get themselves killed in the first minute. I've seen this happen a few times already, and it's pretty funny every single time because you just see this guy like, yeah, I've got this 5100, it's awesome, and then they get themselves killed in the first minute, and they're like, oh, this tank's terrible. I'm just sitting back, just going like, oh god, I remember the days whenever I would do that too. Because it's really easy to do. Once you go from the M445 to this, it is such a game changer. It is awesome. But you do want to get the DCF45 on the M445 or the RL44 if you are going up towards this vehicle, because it just makes the grind far easier on this tank to get the 100mm. And the 100mm, whoa, that gun catches people out. That gun, not only does it catch out your enemies, it catches out the people who are playing this tank as well. Because the actual reload for that gun is like 50 seconds, which means you often see people who start to edge around a corner when there's still like 14 seconds left on the reload, and a lot of the time they get themselves killed by doing that. Because they're used to the DCF45 90mm, they're rolling around the corner gradually, waiting to get their shots off, and then they get themselves killed because they edged out too early. So, yeah, these things here, you have a lot of people right now who have no idea what they're doing in this tank, getting themselves killed very early on, and it's pretty funny, but it's also great for XP and credits, especially if you're the one who gets the tracking shot. It's always something I try to go for whenever I see that opportunity arise. Now, when it comes to 5120, I think I mentioned this already, but it has okay side armor, 80mm. It can side scrape to a very limited extent, but everywhere else the armor is universally garbage. I mean, the turret, 100mm, KV5's R2D2 is thicker than that, and the upper front plate is garbage as well. Like, it's not going to bounce anything other than maybe like a really unlucky tier 7. It's probably like the maximum this thing will ever bounce. So, yeah, pretty much just shoot the upper front plate, shoot the turret, and just easy damage. And hell, even if this thing's over angling its side armor, you can probably shoot the sort of cheek plate here. Then when it comes to the 50B, the 50B is an interesting one because the upper front plate is actually pretty damn strong. This area here and this area here is not strong in the slightest. It's 50mm in comparison to this area here, which is like between 170 and 220 in just raw thickness. Not even taking into account like the angling and stuff like that. So this armor is actually pretty formidable in like this general zone here. But everywhere else the armor is universally worthless. I mean, just shoot the front drive wheel with like a gun that's bigger than 90mm, and you're guaranteed to penetrate the armor behind it because it's only 30mm. And you also have the useless turret, which carries over from the 5120 to an extent, because it's just as useless armor-wise as the 5120 turret. It's got pretty much the same sort of armor profile, it just has 2 degrees better gun depression. So yeah, you have a lot of people rushing around in these really weakly armored, powerful autoloaders. They get point blank range, thinking like, oh yes, I'm about to wreck some people, and then they just get farmed by the entire enemy team just shooting at them at once, because they get to the enemy about probably like they get to the enemy about 20 seconds before the rest of their allies, which means they basically just suicide. They're pretty much suicide scouting in heavy tanks. It's kind of funny if you think about it. So yeah, it's an interesting situation you have at the moment, but it's probably not going to last for too long. That's why I'm making this video early on, because I do see a lot of people at the moment just rushing around like headless chickens in the French autoloaders, not really thinking about what they're doing. But it also does mean you have a lot of people just spamming full gold in the 5120 and the 50B, because I think they've got into their heads that's like the best way to play the tank, and you could argue that's kind of right, because they want to stay at medium to long range if they possibly can, because that way you're not the main focus of the enemy's attention, and then later in the game you can come in and just start trading your health, get a bunch of damage out, and just finish off enemy vehicles. But early on in the game you really can't do that, because you'll just get nuked by Death Stars and things like that, and the FP400-5s, which will just pretty much take off like 90% of your health in like one shot. So yeah, it's one of those things where you have to be very, very careful. But for people playing things like the WZ-111-14, the EBR hatch case, the T10, all these sorts of vehicles here, they're loving these vehicles being top of the tree at the moment because you can farm damage so easily and you can grind XP so easily as well. Like the EBR hatch case, I don't even like this thing very much. I really don't. I find it an awkward vehicle to drive and I don't like driving it. I think it's just the reload in the gun feels way longer than it should be for the alpha damage that it does. Yes, it does have powerful HG rounds, but it just feels awkward. But even this thing here, I'm doing relatively well in this thing, just firing HG against French heavies because it's easy. And then when it comes to the T10, farming 5120s and 5100s in this thing, as well as 50Bs actually as well, whenever you're hold down in this thing is satisfying as hell because they're just spamming shots at you and they might get one penetration out of the 4 shots they fire, but it's not guaranteed by any means. And then when it comes to the 111-14, similar story to the T10, except this thing here has a harder punch. So yeah, it's been fun. Like I grinded like 30,000 XP on this thing. I've grinded like 70,000 XP on this thing. I've grinded like 40,000 XP on this thing. Now I will admit there's some boosters involved in those, but when it comes to doing this here, it is ridiculously easy because I'm just doing consistently well on all these different vehicles. And actually thinking about it, I should really be playing this thing as well because I want to get through this thing sooner rather than later as well. And that's actually just reminded me of that. So yeah, that's another vehicle I need to start grinding too. So let me know what you guys think of this video in the comment section below. Hopefully it was useful to you. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.